Okay, so good morning, everyone. As we said last time and in our first lecture, today we shall move to talk about the teaching methods. Actually, there are many teaching methods. Many teaching methods. Some of them are very popular, some are not. I'm going to talk about a few of them which are found in your book. In addition, I think to one method which is not included in the book, but it is very necessary in order to follow the timeline of the development of these teaching methods. We are going to follow these methods chronologically, in a chronological order. You see, this is the word chronology. We are going to talk about the methods in a chronological order. That is to say, from the oldest to the newest one. From the oldest to the newest one. As we said, there are many, but I'm going to skip the ones that are not popular, that are not really influential. ما أثرت يعني, but the teaching methods we are going to talk about have their own effect. They affected the scope of teaching methods or the scope of teaching and learning. Before that, we need to know for every method we are going to talk about, there are advantages and disadvantages. And I think you know what is meant by advantages and disadvantages. The good points and the bad points. The merits and the demerits. Every method, whether old, new, popular, very popular, not very popular, has some advantages and disadvantages, and this is actually very important. It helps us to evaluate each method later on. When we finish talking about them, we are going to evaluate these methods. Which one is better than the other, or which one is the best teaching method. So keep this in mind, please. For every method, there are good points and bad points. The first method we are going to talk about is called the grammar translation method. Why we start with this method? Because it is the oldest of them. It is the oldest method and the oldest of them. The method actually is affected by the teaching of Latin and Greek. You know Latin and Greek, two languages, but unfortunately they are two dead languages. Latin and Greek are dead languages. لما نقول dead languages معناها they are no longer used. They are no longer used nowadays. فلما نقول they are no longer used nowadays, it means they are not used for communication. They are not used for communication. And you remember last time when we talked about the linguistic principles, and you can go back to the lecture, we said one important linguistic factor that this field is affected with is the following: that we learn a foreign language in order to communicate. We learn a foreign language in order to communicate. Okay, so خلينا نعرف شنو علاقة اللاتن and Greek. قلنا Latin and Greek were taught at that time. Which time? The 18th and 19th centuries. Then, from the 18th and the 19th centuries, Latin and Greek were taught. Taught in which way or in which method? It is something similar to the grammar translation method. So the principles of teaching Latin and Greek, the procedures of teaching Latin and Greek in the 18th and 19th centuries, you see, this is very old. These principles were taken and applied to the teaching of any foreign language. لكن احنا we are interested in teaching English. The principles of teaching Latin and Greek were borrowed, were taken, and they were applied to the teaching of any foreign language, including, of course, English. But the question is, why people at that time were teaching and were learning Latin and Greek, although they were dead languages, and they are not used for communication. وبالمناسبة لحد الآن اكو جامعات في أوروبا عندها قسم للغات اللاتينية واللغتين اللاتينية والغريقية، موجود القسم لكن لأسباب أخرى. So we said why people at that time were learning these languages although they were and they are dead languages. Simply speaking, because these two languages are the languages of scholarship. They are called the languages of scholarship, Latin and Greek. وباي scholarship نعني العلم. طبعا scholarship معناها زمالة دراسية بالمناسبة أو بعثة دراسية. الزمالة هي fellowship. لكن it has another meaning هو العلم. ولذلك الشخص العالم نقول عليه scholar. He is a scholar يعني عالم. ف Latin and Greek are the languages of science and technology and scholarship in general. أبسط مثال نعطيه حتى نثبت هذا الكلام. Your course is called linguistics, right? What is linguistics as a word? Is it English? No, it is not English. This is Latin. Lingua معناها tongue، اللسان. ولذلك علم اللغة احنا نسميه بمصر وبالمغرب يسموه علم اللسانيات أو اللسانيات. Because lingua means tongue، لسان. Okay. You study phonetics, right? This is a Latin word. You study phonology. This is a Latin word. You study morphology, a Latin word. You study syntax, a Latin word. You have a microphone to talk to me, and I have a microphone to talk to you. This is a Latin word. ولاحظ اشتقاق الكلمة. Micro معناها small. Phone صوت. وهنا موجودة كلمة phone أيضا. هنا موجودة كلمة phone. This is how Latin is used. In chemistry, all the elements are Latin. كل العناصر الكيميائية هي في الحقيقة اسمها لاتينية. Latin. That's why these principles of teaching Latin and Greek were taken and were applied to the teaching of any foreign language, and that was in the 18th and 19th century. Okay. Now let's come to the procedures of the method. What are the main procedures in the method? And remember, I am going to talk about these things in brief. أنا ما أشرح هاي الطرق بالتفصيل حسب ما موجود يعني in your book. I am going to refer to them or explain them in brief, but sometimes I'll have to say things in detail from time to time. This is for your benefit. This is for your benefit. I said this before. You are going to be English language teachers. You have to pay attention to this lesson. يعني من الدروس المهمة قلت لكم بالمحاضرة الأولى هي المناهج in your third year اللي هو methods of teaching English as a foreign language. وهذا الفصل is a sort of complement or addition to that course اللي هو مناهج. So what are the main procedures of the method? And remember, I am going to say things in brief or roughly. يعني every day learners are given a text. You know a text انتم تسموها القطعة passage يعني. So every day students or learners are given a text every day. وركزوا على هاي الكلمة نكتبها كلمة واحدة. Every day learners are given a text. This text is highly rhetorical. Highly rhetorical. What is meant by rhetorical? Rhetorical is balaghi in Arabic. Remember, this text is not only rhetorical, but it is highly rhetorical. And this text is written by a famous writer. لما نقول highly rhetorical written by a famous writer, it means the language of this text is very difficult actually. Why we say it is difficult? Why we consider it very difficult? Because it is highly rhetorical. سر البلاغة يكمن بالصعوبة في كثير من الأحيان. مو دائما لكن في كثير من الأحيان. So the text is highly rhetorical, long text by the way, written by a famous writer. The language of the text is difficult. Okay. The teacher should explain all the grammatical rules found in the text. ومنها أجت التسمية grammar translation method. The teacher should explain all the grammatical rules found in the text. Remember, this procedure happens every day. كل يوم يعني يجي الطالب قدام هاي القطعة وشرح لي هذه القواعد. What grammatical rules? Any grammatical rules found in the text. Any grammatical rule found in the text are going to be explained. إذا ماكو تدرج. There is no gradation of difficulty. وهاي واحدة من ال disadvantages of the method. This is one of the disadvantages of the method. There is no gradation of material. You know gradation يعني تدرج بالمادة. تدرج يعني نبدي من الأسهل نروح إلى الأصعب. لكن in this method we have a text. Any rule in the text is going to be explained. And again, remember, this procedure takes place every day. Every day grammar, every day grammar, every day grammar. Is this boring or not? Yes, it is boring. يعني حتى احنا نتداول بكلامنا اليومي نقول الجرامر مادة جافة. مو هذا الكلام تقولونه انتم ونقوله احنا بصورة عامة. الجرامر مادة جافة. شنو جافة؟ It is boring. It is boring. So every day a text, difficult text, highly rhetorical. كتبناها كلمة rhetorical لو ما كتبناها. highly rhetorical. rhetoric هي علم البلاغة. And the teacher should explain all the grammatical rules. What happens later is that, of course, when we say it is a rhetorical text, it has difficult vocabulary معناها, right? Difficult vocabulary. So the students are given a long bilingual list. A long bilingual list. ولاحظ كلمة bilingual is a Latin word. شنو معناها bilingual؟ معناها two languages. Bi معناها two. Lingual قلنا معناها language. شلون احنا نقول الكلمة بالانجليزي معناها بالعربي؟ هذا المقصود بالbilingual list. This list contains the difficult words with their meaning in the native language. يعني the word in the foreign language and its meaning in the native language. And students or learners, احنا نقول learners بهذا الفصل أفضل, should memorize this long word, a long list. They should memorize this long list actually, not this, not one. It is not one. It is every day. Every day, text, grammar, then a long list of vocabulary items. Again, is this boring or not? It is very boring. يوميا تحفظ أنت مثلا فد 100 كلمة in the foreign language with its meaning every day, every day. This is boring. What happens later? The learners should translate the text to the native language. They should translate the text into the native language. After that, there should be evaluation to this translation. Evaluation to what? Evaluation to the translation. Of course, evaluation by the teacher. The teacher is going to translate, to evaluate the translation. إذا تلاحظون, the ultimate aim of this method, ultimate يعني شيء مطلق يعني, the ultimate aim or objective actually, يختلفن لكن مو موضوعنا الآن. Objective يعني بعيد المدى. The ultimate objective of the method is not teaching the foreign language, but it is translation. Now, look at this method. If you try to measure the advantages and the disadvantages of the method, الآن شرحنا يعني in brief the main procedures of the method. قلنا text, highly rhetorical, grammar rules are explained, bilingual lists should be memorized, and there is translation, there is evaluation of translation. Now, what are the disadvantages of this method? Of course, the method failed during the early years of the 20th century. During the early years of the 20th century, it was replaced by another method بعدين نحكي عنها next time. But the method proved to be a big failure. تلاحظون انتم هذا اختصار يعني. Why boring? Why failure? Because it is boring. Always grammar and translation. لاحظوا بكل البروسيجرز اللي قلناها. If you look at the evaluation of skills, in our previous lecture, if you remember, we said skills should be taught. Teaching a foreign language is the acquisition of a set of skills. إذا تذكرون هذا linguistic principle قلناه بالمحاضرة السابقة. لكن if you look at this teaching method, وطبعا نسيت نقطة. Inside the classroom, this is very important actually. Inside the classroom, the teaching should be always in the native language. وهذا فشي غريب يعني تلاحظون انتم. يعني لغة التدريس always the native language. I am teaching you English, but I should use Arabic, not English, in the presentation of the material. Well, this is a very big defect, a very big disadvantage in the method. If you evaluate the 4 skills, they're listening? No, because learners do not listen to the foreign language. They always listen to the native language. وهذا a horrible disadvantage in the method. يعني every day, always, learners never listen to the foreign language. They listen always to the native language. So there is no listening. What about speaking? من شرحناها قلنا الطلاب يحجون. No, actually, there is no speaking. Learners just listen to grammar explanation in the native language. They memorize words and they do translation. The teacher may ask students or learners some questions that require short answers. Then في الحقيقة there is no speaking. There is no speaking. What about reading? What about reading? Is there reading? No, actually. في هاي البروسيجرز اللي شرحناها, the learners do not read. They do not have the opportunity to listen. Right? They do not have the opportunity to speak. And they do not have the opportunity to read. What about writing? There is no writing as well. There is no writing as well. The only writing exercise done by the learners is translation. So if we evaluate the method, it is a big failure. Why big failure? Because all the 4 skills are neglected. All the 4 skills are neglected. No listening, no speaking, no reading, no writing. The teaching is always in the native language. This is a big defect. It is boring because the procedures are boring. Always there is memorization of long list of vocabulary items, always grammar explanation. That's why the method was replaced in the early years of the 20th century. بالضبط 1920 it was replaced by another method which is the reading method. نحكي عنها بالدرس القادم. It was replaced by the reading method. قد تكون هاي الطريقة ما موجودة بالكتاب لكن نشرح حتى لا نقطع السلسلة. The chain of the development of teaching methods اللي بدأت قلنا بالقرن الثامن عشر التاسع عشر وبعدين 1920 وبعدين بالثلاثينات طلعت لنا another method, then in the 40s, then in the 70s. فحتى لا يصير قطع فلازم ناخذها ونشرحها أيضا باختصار. This is, I think, let me check if this is all. Yes. And of course, because the method is affected by the teaching of Latin and Greek, there is no communication at all. Why there is no communication in this method? Because it is affected by the teaching of Latin and Greek and they are dead languages. إذن فمبادئ of teaching a dead language were used to teach English as a foreign language. That's why if this method is used, learners cannot use the foreign language for communication. There would be no communication at all. Hopefully things are clear. As I said, this is in a brief. We shall continue next time talking about the reading method. Okay. So see you next time.